Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Bamboo Lab Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Bosley, and for the better part of the past 26 years, I've had the most distinct privilege and honor of working alongside of and coaching some of the world's top performers. What we do here each week is we bring their ideas and strategies and wisdom directly to you. Have you ever felt like you're that hamster on the hamster wheel of life and you're running, but you're just simply spinning and not going in the trajectory or the direction or the pace you'd like? Well, if so, you've landed in the right spot. This Bamboo Lab podcast is created and broadcast just for you, all you strivers, thrivers, and survivors out there. For those listeners who are interested in learning more about what we do here at the Bamboo Lab, more about our private performance coaching, our team development, and our corporate speaking, feel free to email me at any time directly. My email is Brian, and that's Brian with an I, at bamboolab3, and that's the number 3.com. Brian at bamboolab3.com. Well, real quickly, just some housekeeping thoughts here. We're now being broadcast in nearly every state in the nation, 25 countries and 6 continents, and several hundred cities around the great state or the great country called the United States of America. I want to read one heart letter we received last week from Tom. Tom said, Brian, I love the Fred Schultz episode. His story of being committed to a psych hospital and then coming back from that was so impactful. Thanks for bringing his story to us. Tom, you're welcome. That was an amazing episode with an amazing guest, and I think today you're going to be just as happy and impacted by the guests we have on. This episode is dedicated to one of the warmest women I've ever had the chance of meeting, one of the kindest women, Betty Lou Korhorn. Our special guest today, it was his mother. She passed on to the Lord in 1997. And I want to thank her for being such a great hostess and being so hospitable to all of us crazy, crude, and hungry rugby players as we would flood her farm in Big Rapids, Michigan each year for a weekend of deer hunting. Mrs. Korhorn, this one's for you. Let's dissect. All right, today we have a guest who is also one of my core friends in life, a brother to me. Has been for 30 years or more. His name is Kevin Korhorn. He is the husband of his amazing wife, Laura, and they've been married for 29 years. And I had the honor of being one of the men standing next to him when he brought the union of the two of them together. He is also the father of Joshua, Caleb, and Grace. Kevin is an avid philanthropist, outdoorsman, hobby farmer, but most importantly, he's a lifelong learner. He calls South Bend, Indiana, his home. Kevin is a financial advisor, and he has been working in the field since 1994. His goal when he started off were different than they are now, for sure. When he started off, he just was looking at becoming an advisor, making a good career for his family, for himself, and changing some people's lives. He's gone beyond that. Now he has set his goal at changing the entire world. He uses the tools of financial planning, the process, and his incredible passion for helping people in doing so. One of his main objectives when he started was to really surround himself with some of the greatest financial planners in the world. And he did that, and he has been doing that and continuing to do that with his amazing team at Korhorn Financial. He specializes in helping small business owners and high net worth individuals organize their financial lives in a way that allows them to have the peace of mind with their financial life and to achieve the important areas of their lives that are not simply just financial. His motto and what he is accomplishing is he is changing the world one financial life at a time. My brother, one of my best friends, Kevin, welcome to the Bamboo Lab Podcast.
Thank you, Brian. It is awesome to be with you, my man.
All right. Well, I know who you are. I know the good, the bad, and the ugly. But
yes, you do.
Yes, I do. But the Bamboo Lab listeners don't. So can you tell us, who is Kevin?
I'll just tell you the good. How's that?
Let's stick with that for now.
Yeah, I grew up on a farm in Big Rapids, Michigan, and it was certainly a simpler, more innocent time. It seems like to be alive, and it was a really cool. I had a really cool childhood. All I ever wanted to do growing up was join the Army and kill the bad guys. And so as soon as I was actually 17 when I enlisted, And I left right after I graduated from high school and spent 3 years in the Army, and then came home and went to Central Michigan University. And that's where I met Brian. I still remember the moment that I met Brian. I was at the rugby field, and I was kind of new to rugby, and he pulled up in this 1971 four-door Chevy Nova, a tan Chevy Nova with Bart Simpson painted on the top, playing rugby. And I looked at him, and, as a guy, you kind of look around and you're like, okay, who's here? And, he's this handsome, very confident guy. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I probably am not going to like this guy. And as I got to know him, I don't know, somehow our hearts were just kind of bonded together. And I have enjoyed knowing Brian. So it's really an honor to be here. But I got a degree in finance at Central Michigan University. I spent a couple summers working at a Christian camp in Everett, Michigan, Spring Hill Camp, and those were amazing summers. And so I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be I'm going to do something in Christian camping. So when I graduated from college in 1993, I moved to South Bend, Indiana, and I worked at Camp Rayburn, a small Christian camp on the west side of South Bend, for economically disadvantaged kids that had been around for 70 some years. I worked there for the summer, and I realized that I probably that probably wasn't what I was supposed to do, but I was on staff. And so at the end of the summer, I talked to the executive director, and I said, hey, I don't think this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And he said, okay, well, I said, I'll stick around as long as you need me to. And he's like, you can go. And I said, sweet, I'm out of here. I didn't know what to do. I just gotten married, and I knew I needed to be a provider for my family. And so I went to work at a meat packing plant. And my goal was every 2 weeks to bring home more money than my wife, who was a first grade teacher at the time. And so I had to get a little overtime every week in order to be able to do that. And so I was just praying about, all right, what am I supposed to do? And God said, well, use your degree. And my degree was in finance. And so I knew I didn't want to go into corporate finance, and I was trying to figure out what to do. And I called my buddy. I had a buddy in Lansing at the time who was working for American Express Financial Advisors. And he said, hey, you should do what I'm doing. You'll be great at it and you'll love it. And so I said, okay, that's what I'll do. And back in the day, when you found your job through the newspaper, you look in the classified ads, the help wanted ads, and you do that. The American Express Financial Advisors ran an ad every week saying, hey, we're hiring advisors. So I applied. I got the letter back in the mail, and I was so pumped. When I got home from work, I opened it up, and they said, hey, you are going to be very successful at something else. And I thought, what is wrong with these people? Like, they're making they've obviously made some horrible mistakes. So I called them right away, and I said, hey, listen, I'm not sure what happened here, but I have a friend who works for American Express Financial Advisors in Lansing, and I am eminently more qualified than he is. So you should be hiring me. And maybe I didn't really say that, but so anyway, so they said, okay, well, we're happy to talk to you and interview you. Come on in. And so that started my career in financial planning. Now, the trick was I was in South Bend, Indiana. I didn't know anyone. And so I just made a deal with God. I said, God, this is where I need to be in 5 years. And if I'm here, I'll stick with it. And if I'm not, I won't, but I'll give this a shot for 5 years and see how it goes. And, but you have to bring me the people, because I don't know anyone. And he did that. And it was interesting, through year 3.5 in my career, my trajectory, my vector was, I wasn't going to make it. I wasn't going to be where I needed to be, at the 5 year mark. And in November 3rd of 1997, my mom died of ovarian cancer. And, I think my mom, Brian, is very similar to your mom. I think as you go through life, you need one person. You don't need a handful. You don't need a dozen. I think you just need one person who loves you unconditionally and believes in you. And that was my mother. I had a great father too, but my mom really was that person. She was a cheerleader, and she was always saying, "Oh, you can do anything you want to do," and all this stuff. And I would listen to her. I'm like, "Oh, come on, Mom." She's like, "No, I believe in you. You can." And so I think that somehow that soaked in over time, and it gave me some confidence or belief that, hey, if I do set my mind to something, I can do it. So November 3rd of 97, my mom dies of ovarian cancer after a 19-month battle. She battled even on Friday. We went up and I saw my mom in the hospital. She died on Sunday, and she was just skin and bones. She looked like someone who'd been in a concentration camp because the cancer just kind of eaten her away. And she was cold. And so I crawled into bed with her and just hugged her. And she's like, I didn't want to do another round of chemo, but it looks like I'm going to have to go back to the cottage and get strong again and do another round of chemo. And I'm looking at her, and I'm like, she's on death's doorstep. Like, what in the world is she talking about? But that's kind of how she was. She was tough. She was one tough mother. And so anyway, so she dies November. Actually, it was Monday, November 3rd, Monday morning, 5:55 a.m. And November 11th of 1997, I went to the strategic coach program for the first time. It was my first strategic coach session. It's a day-long, once a quarter meeting for entrepreneurs. And I wasn't making it. Again, I was at about year 3 in my career, but I believed that I could. I just needed to know what I didn't know. And my problem is I didn't really know what I didn't know. I just knew there were some things that I would need to know in order to break through. And the strategic coach program was instrumental in changing really everything in my business life, and really the rest of my life as well. And what I learned in that process is the value of having a good coach. And so I was in that program for 5 years. I'm still in a study group with guys that I met in that program. We call ourselves the Phoenix Group because our first meeting was in Phoenix, Arizona. And we do a quarterly conference call and an on-site meeting once a year. And so that's that coaching program. My revenue doubled in 1998, in 1999, in 2000, in 2001, and it just kept changing. It was interesting because one of the guys in the program with me dropped out after the first year and said, "Look, I learned everything that I need to know. And so I just need to go apply what I learned." In the first year, he'd been to 4 sessions. Well, the 5th session at the strategic coach program was the most influential of all the sessions that I've ever attended in my life. And in that session, we did an exercise called the 10 times mind expander, which is if you could 10x your revenue and 10x your income over the next 10 years, what would that look like? And so the exercise was we took our career up to this point and we segmented it into 5 different distinct segments, and it didn't matter what time frame was. You just had to say that in this segment, this was the season of this was the season of this. And then as we were doing it, we said, all right, we're looking back from 10 years from now, and what are the next 5 segments of your life that allowed you to 10x without 10xing your time or energy investment in the business. Like the idea was you have even better life balance 10 years from now, but your results are 10x. And so that session really changed my life, because when I put the numbers on paper, I looked at those and I really didn't believe it. And yet in 2008, almost to the penny, everything at 10x, and it was truly unbelievable and really life-changing.
Well, Kevin, have you ever said thank you publicly to that friend of yours who recommended that you join the financial planning industry? No, because actually I have to confess, I'm still harboring some bitterness towards that person because he said, "Oh, it's going to be great. It's going to be easy." And so I go and I start studying this for the Series 7 test, and we had an initial kind of interview, which was a 20-page interview that we had to memorize word for word. And I remember doing this, and I remember thinking, what was Brian thinking? He told me this was going to be great, and I don't know if you necessarily said it would be easy, but one of the things that hooked me was you called my house one evening because you were doing a phone clinic of your own, and they're like, all right, well, I need to be talking to people, and I'm being monitored, so you were talking to me and giving me your financial planning shtick. And I listened to it and I'm like, this is amazing. Who is this guy? I went to college with him. What have you done with my Brian? This is really great stuff. And I thought, if I could be half as good as Brian, and sound as well as he does, that this would work. And so no, I do like to joke with you a little bit about that, buddy. But yeah, thank you for recommending me.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Get the latest insights from top mortgage pros on Mortgage Connects, a podcast by MGIC. We interview thought leaders from across the industry to share their wide-ranging expertise and candid views on critical market developments and current housing trends. Our guests reveal highly effective marketing and referral strategies, training tips and best practices, and what you can expect from the mortgage market in the future. Hear from experts like best-selling author Todd Duncan, U.S. Bank's Lenny McNeil, and Freddie Mac's Danny Gardner. Listen to Mortgage Connects on your favorite app or at mortgageconnects.com today.
Well, I think your clients are the ones who should be thanking me, because you have definitely changed their world, as well as the 80 employees you have at Korhorn Financial Group. And that's what I want to stop for just a minute and share with the Bamboo Lab listeners is just dissect a bit of what Kevin just shared with all of us. When he started as a financial planner and financial advisor in 1994, he said, I'm going to give it 5 years. And he said, no matter what, I'm going to be here 5 years. I'm going to give it everything I have, and we're going to see where we land. How many of us have done that? How many of us have started a project, a side hustle, a job, a career, a business, who, as soon as the things get tough, we decide that this must not be the right thing. I'm uncomfortable. I'm not making the money I want. I'm not reaching the level of success and happiness and contentment. And we bail out at such an early stage. Just like the gentleman who started in the strategic coach program with Kevin that dropped out at session number 4, where the real impact was session number 5. How many times have we given up on things where just around the corner is that big lift that we were looking for and striving for? He struggled for 3 or 4 years, and he still really wasn't making it. And now Korhorn Financial Group is one of the most amazing companies I've ever had the privilege of knowing and working with 80 employees out of the South Bend, Indiana area, and they have an impact reaching multiple states across this great nation of ours. I really loved what you said, Kevin, about your mother. And I think there's so much value in the learning and the lesson and the wisdom. We only need that one person who loves us unconditionally and who fully, truly believes in us for us to succeed. So I think for all the listeners out there, think of who that one person is in your life. When you're feeling down, you're feeling defeated, broken, beaten, who's that one person There's one for every one of us who loves you unconditionally and fully believes in you. And at the same time, who are you, or who is the person in your life who you can honestly say, I love this person unconditionally, and I believe in this person without doubt? There's so much value in the wisdom shared by Kevin just a few moments ago, and by the love and unconditional love and belief that his mother gave him over the course of her amazing life. Kevin, I'm going to go out on a limb with this, and I'm going to assume your mother was your greatest inspiration growing up. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I think so, Brian. When I think about that question, my greatest inspiration, it's interesting because it was a simpler time. We grew up in I would say it was fairly sheltered in Big Rapids, Michigan, fairly homogeneous. A lot of people were the same. For the most part, we were all poor, and we didn't know it. That was the cool thing, because we had these rich lives, and we were very connected, especially to my mother's family. My mom was an inspiration. My grandpa Wittenbach was an inspiration as well. He had an 8th grade education and was the township treasurer for 50 years. He started a farm from scratch and built it up to a 600-acre farm that supported 2 families with dairy farm, orchards, and everything else. And he had 17 grandkids, and all of us thought we were his favorite. He tragically died in a car accident at 71, but even at 71, he was a big, strapping, strong guy, full head of jet black hair, and was still the hardest working guy on the farm. And so, and I think my mom possessed some of those things that Elmer Wittenbach possessed, and she passed those on. And then we had, as I look back, I compare my growing up to how my children have been raised and grown up. And one of the things, the cool things that we had growing up as well is we, my kids have these scars on the back of their heads from the helicopter blades hitting them. I would say if we did anything wrong as being a little bit of helicopter parents, my parents were not like that. My parents, we lived in the country, and we had motorcycles, and we'd be gone. I'd be gone for the day riding around with a couple of my buddies who also have motorcycles, and they didn't worry about it as long as I was home for dinner. And you could operate like that. But our closest neighbor was a half mile away, and the other one was a mile away, and so they didn't really worry about too much. Again, a more innocent, maybe more simpler time. But my mom, certainly, as I watched her, as I watched our church family, as I watched the people in my life, they were all inspiring to me. And I would say that it was more of I feel like I was raised more by a pack than just my family. My family had a lot of support from their very close friends.
I love the statement you said earlier. You grew up in Big Rapids, Michigan, fairly sheltered. It was a simpler time, fairly homogenous. People were poor, but yet you lived a rich life. How many of us can really look at our lives sometimes when we're struggling financially, or in a relationship, or in our career, and still say, despite all of that, I'm living a rich life? I think that's an incredibly powerful way of looking at living and love and life. So I just want to take the time right now to thank 3 people. Mrs. Korhorn, Mr. Korhorn, Ken Sr., and Grandpa Wittenbach for bringing this amazing man into this world. Because I can honestly say I've known Kevin for so long, and since the day I met him, and I'll share with you, when I walked onto the rugby pitch that first practice, when I first met Kevin, I saw this blonde-haired, goofy kid jumping around, screaming with more energy than I have ever seen in another human being. And I, just like Kevin, thought, I'm never going to like this guy. And to this day, from probably 2 or 3 practices in, I began to really care for him to the point where we started saying to each other, we are brothers and I love you, within a few weeks. And Kevin has made his family and his friends extremely proud with the success he's reached, not just financial success, that's obvious, but the way he's impacted the world with his clients, his family, his friends, and all of the travels he and his family do to impoverished countries, and the time and the philanthropy that he delivers to the world. And I think it all started with those three individuals, Mom, Dad, and Grandpa. So thank you to all three of them for bringing this man into existence. Kevin, what would you say? It's been an odd 3 years for us around the world. What do you think in the last 3 years has been your greatest learning?
Oh, I think I can't remember the book, so forgive me because I'm quoting a book and I can't tell you which one it is. I think it was Andy Andrews, like The Traveler's Gift, I think it was. But he talked about, and this was maybe it's a great book. That I would recommend that book if you haven't read it. Get it, read it, and read it to your kids. But I think when he was talking about Abraham Lincoln, maybe, but he talked about in times of uncertainty, seek wisdom. And in the last 3 years, so we have, Korhorn Financial Group has 4 locations, and we've got 80 people on our team. And this was a time where leadership was demanded, and we're far enough beyond the kind of the crisis type events of the coronavirus that we can now start to look back and do an autopsy of, hey, what in the world happened. And so I learned during that time. I mean, we made some very decisive decisions about how we were going to operate. Thankfully, and I know we're not going to discuss religion or politics, but thankfully, the state of Indiana deemed the financial services industry an industry that could remain open. There were a few that they said, hey, they had a fancy term for it. I can't think of it right now, but hey, you can stay open. And so we stayed open. And I looked at what was happening, and I was tracking the coronavirus from January of 2020, when a good friend of mine who was going to fly to China said, hey, I'm not flying to China because I can't. I'm like, what do you mean you can't? He's like, no. They said, well, maybe we can fly in May. And I thought, well, this is weird. So I started looking into it right away. And I was surprised at what was happening that no one was talking about, or if it was being talked about, they're saying, hey, there's nothing to worry about here, et cetera, et cetera. So there were some very difficult days because that happened kind of in the midst of tax season. And so we have a tax and accounting firm, as well as our financial planning firm and our insurance agency. So I was just hoping that none of our tax preparers got the coronavirus, because they would then be out and they wouldn't be able to prepare returns. Well, the deadline got extended to July, and some other things happened. So, but I learned, I'm going to say that was my most challenging time as a leader. And it's exhausting. The amount of energy that it takes, and to be grounded and make decisions that you knew would only be, with the benefit of hindsight, a good decision or a poor decision. And so what have I learned? I've learned that to me, it feels like this time has kind of polarized us as a country. And many people's thinking is very tribal. And that's not, I just personally believe that's not a recipe for success. Last night I talked to 2 guys. I talked to a guy, these are neighbors of mine. One's an excavator and the other is a facilities manager and manages about 80 buildings for a financial institution. And both of these guys talked for well over an hour. Needless to say, my wife was wondering, like, where have you been tonight? And I just said, look, these guys need to talk. People right now, it feels like coming out of the last couple of years are so hungry for community and relationship and connection. And if they're not getting it, they'll seek it. And the guys last night, great guys, salt of the earth men who make this country work. They needed someone to talk to, and they just kept going. They're like, hey, I got to tell you about this, and I want you to know about this. And so I listened, because it's important, these connections that we make. At the end of the day, we talked about, growing up poor but living a rich life. Like, what is it truly that makes someone rich in this life, if that's even something to strive for? But I think the only thing that matters in this life, Brian, is our relationships. So I think in the tricky thing is you look at people today, you see people walking around, you can't see it on them. Like, hey, I'm lonely. Hey, I'm afraid. Hey, I need some help. Hey, I need a word of encouragement, right? Encouragement is just me lending you my courage. It's not written on their faces. It's not a slogan on their shirt that they're wearing. And so this is the interesting thing when you study like trauma and things that people have been through. You can't see it, but man, is it real. And so out of this, what I've learned to try to slow down and try to connect with people, because there are just a lot of people that are really hurting, and the last few years have been traumatic to them, and they don't know exactly. They really don't realize it. I don't think we're good at realizing we're sick while we are. I was just sick for 9 days, and I didn't realize it. Looking back, I'm like, what was I thinking? Why wasn't I seeking medical help sooner? What's going on here? I think in the midst of it, your ability to self-diagnose and then to take appropriate action it's really limited. So anyways, there are a lot of hurting people that might not even understand the extent of the trauma that they've faced in the last couple of years. And so there's just a lot of people out there that need help, need encouragement. And it doesn't take much to encourage someone, just a few words.
Kevin, you've always been wired that way, at least since the moment I met you back in the 90s or late 80s. And I just want to share with the Bamboo Lab listeners, there were so many times Kevin and I were roommates, and we were captains of the rugby team, officers as they're called, together. And you would think that rugby players are these tough, uncaring, unsympathetic, unempathetic rogues. But that wasn't the case. So many times when one of us was going through a difficult time, whether it was me missing my daughter who was 200 miles away, whether it was Kevin going through some emotional or challenges at school or family, we would often disappear on our motorcycles or our bicycles and go down to the falls. I forget what they were called. Do you remember, Kevin?
The dams.
The dams, yes, in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. And we would sit on these rocks and we would just sit and talk, sometimes for hours, and listen to each other and try to understand and empathize. And it was some of the most therapeutic times of my life. Still remember 30 years later vividly those moments and those feelings and emotions that were brought up during those times. So you've always had that gift, Kevin, of really helping other people to find a connection with you, and you've always lived this motto. And I think you've realized intellectually later in life, but you've always lived it emotionally on the right side of your brain, that there's nothing more important in this life than relationships and connection. So wonderful. Well, I'm going to ask the difficult question now, Kevin, and that is, over the course of your existence on this earth, what is the most difficult thing you've gone through?
Yeah, that's a tough question, Brian. I've had this. God has made these very pleasant places for my feet to land, and as I look at my life, I think of the movie Forrest Gump, and someone who just found himself in really amazing places at amazing times. And I think of my life, my career like that. I've just been blessed, just incredibly so. Nothing. I would call it grace. Grace is unmerited favor. So nothing that I've done to deserve anything, but it's just I've had a really blessed life. I think there were a couple of difficult times that when my mother, the weekend that my mother died, we were all they lived on Lac La Belle up by Copper Harbor, Michigan, and it's just stunningly beautiful up there. And I had a long walk by myself and talked to God about it. And I just, this was, as the youngest child, I was kind of used to getting what I wanted. And it felt like this was the first time in my life that I wasn't going to get what I wanted. And it was pretty obvious that Mom was going to be dying here soon. And I, in my long walk and talk with God, I just said, okay, God, I know different people respond differently at this point, but I trust you. This doesn't make any sense to me, and this is like the thing that I've wanted the most in my life is for my mother to live, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But in all of this, I trust you, and that helped me. There's something that felt like it started a healing process in me at that time. So that was a tough time. I would say the other most difficult time was the financial crisis of 2008 and 9. We in serving our clients, it was uniquely challenging because we had the reserve primary was our money market account. That we used for our clients for their sweep account and for if they had extra cash to set aside. It was one of the biggest in the world and had a strong name, reputation, credit rating, all these things, and it broke the buck. And that's a technical term, but money market accounts are valued at $1. And after the Lehman Brothers crisis in I think September 15th of 2008. By September Tuesday the 17th, the reserve primary had broken the buck. So now all of our clients are saying, "Well, what's going on?" And this didn't make any sense to anyone. But in addition to that, there were some products that we had helped our clients with to solve some of their financial problems, and those products were failing. The stock market was down 38%, and it actually kept its precipitous fall until March 9th of 2009 of that year. And in February, I got out of the shower and I had this pimple on my stomach. And I'm like, well, it looks like a pimple, but it's not a pimple, and it hurts like crazy. And so I went to the doctor, and he said, "Oh, yeah, you have shingles." He said, this doesn't make any sense. You're 40 years old. Usually, it's an older person or someone who's got cancer, but they've got an extreme load of stress in their life. He said, "Do you have any stress in your life?" And I said, "Well, I'm a financial planner, and none of my clients' financial plans work. And if things don't turn around, there are going to have to be drastic changes in everyone's lives." And so that was a very, very difficult, dark time. I remember one night, in the middle of the night, I woke up, and it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I usually sleep like a baby, so it's strange to wake up, but I was awake and I was wide awake, and so I went downstairs and sat in the living room, and then I just just cried out to God, and I said, God, what do you want from me? Whatever you've given me, all this stuff I was living in a beautiful house, had a beautiful wife, and 3 beautiful children, and this business that was growing. I think we probably had close to 20 people at the time. I'm like, God, whatever you want, God, you can have it. You can take anything that you want. You can take me. You can take my life. You can take my wife, my kids, the house. None of this stuff matters. And I still go back to that night. It felt for me like a turning point where I just released everything. And I said, look, for much of my life, I've had the illusion of control. And I think that's most of us. We either understand that we don't have control or we have the illusion of control. It's one of those two, most likely. And so I came to grips with the realization that there's so many things I had no control over. So I was going to spend my time focusing on the things that I did have control over. And it was hard. It was so hard because your clients would come in, they'd sit in your office, and you'd start talking, and they'd start crying. And you're like, and you felt like you borrowed your best friend's bike and you just wrecked it, and you brought it back to him like, well, here you go, Brian. Thanks for letting me borrow your bike. It's all wrecked now. And so people would cry. And so I just, during that time, I spent a lot of time dealing with internal finance, not the numbers, because there are numbers. That's the external stuff. But the internal stuff is, how do we feel about money and how do we process things? So I'd write up on the board the 5 stages of grief. And so I'd write, anger, denial, depression, bargaining, acceptance. And I would put that up there and I'd say, where are you right now? And they'd say, I am angry. And we talk through it. And the problem is, a lot of these things are intangible. I mean, you see numbers on an investment statement that you get, but really, as I sit across the table from my clients, I represent all of that. And so this is where the clients are looking at me as the representation of things that seem fairly hopeless. And so I spent a lot of time just helping people come to terms with how are they feeling about their finances, and what are the things that I can do to help them? What are the things that they can do to help themselves? And how do we manage through this? So that, I would say, that was probably the most difficult time in my life. And, if you're listening to that and you say that's not a big deal, I don't blame you. At the time, it was a huge deal for me, and it was learning. But I actually know people who have had really difficult seasons of life and struggled with things. And I mean, we just lost Congresswoman Jackie Walorski on a horrible car crash just a few days ago. And you realize, nope, there are people in this life who are suffering much more than I am or ever have, and there's much greater sorrow and hurt than I know.
Yeah, I think suffering is all relative, and regardless of the level of our suffering, it's how we handle the suffering that makes the determining factor between the direction we go, up or down. You've gone through a great deal. You've had many, many years of ups and downs, more downs at the beginning of your career than ups, more ups at the latter stage of your career. What do you consider now, Kevin, as we sit here in 2022, what do you consider to be a win or a triumph in life?
I consider a win. There's a couple things. For me personally, it's about living a life of meaning, a life of significance, that for me comes through serving. And so I love to serve. I love to serve our clients. My wife and I have the privilege of serving our brothers and sisters in Christ over in Africa. We spend a lot of time in Liberia, Senegal. We just, this summer, we're in Ethiopia. And we are so blessed. The other day I was just walking with my wife. There's a half-mile long street right by our house, and so we do a lot of walking on that street with our dog Winston. And I remember just thinking, I am so thankful for this road. I mean, this road is awesome. And you think, well, that's kind of strange. But if you've ever been to a third or fourth world country where they have roads, but you wouldn't really consider them roads, and they're horrible, and during the rainy season, they're even worse. And I just remember thinking, I am so grateful that we have nice roads where we live. And I'm thankful for hot water. Like, we have hot water in our shower. We don't have to take a room temperature shower, and we have water pressure and clean water. And I've never gotten E. coli in this country. So I don't know. So I think living in gratitude is a win. If you can begin your day in gratitude every Monday morning, we have a big start to our Monday. We do something called positive focus, and then BIG stands for begin in gratitude. And we just we use Microsoft Teams to communicate in our office, and just write to someone on the team and just tell them something that we're thankful for or appreciate them for what something happened last week. So I think, because I believe, Brian, that if you want to live a life of meaning, a life of significance, you need to see yourself not as a reservoir. If you think of a reservoir, you think still water where things just pool up, and really, if you think of a reservoir, either an entrepreneur or a reservoir person, it's like, okay, they've created this pool of standing water, and it's all for them, their purpose, their benefit. And I like to think of myself as a river entrepreneur, a river kind of life giver, and with all kinds of variety of life and tributaries flowing in here and things flowing out there, and because the stuff that I've been able to accumulate, it's not for me. And so I certainly enjoy certain things and benefit from them, but I think if you can work on your mindset and think, okay, this stuff that I'm able to do because I live in the greatest country in the history of the world, it's not all about me. And if you can find a way to go to some of these other places in the world where people, it's a struggle to have one meal a day, and it doesn't make sense. But they don't have running water, they don't have electricity. They live in very, very challenging situations, and you can go there and you can see their joy. You realize, okay, I wanted to do something to help these folks.
What you shared reminds me so much of what our guest in the special episode released last week, episode number 35, Derek Kinney, shared with the audience, as well as in his book. He shared that something to the effect of, money is not bad and good people should have more of it. With the context being that when we have more money, we can do so much greater good in the world. He said it's probably the greatest leverage of doing good in this world. He also shared many statistics and studies that showed when we give, when we contribute, when we add to those tributaries of other people's lives as we flow down the river, that it increases and benefits us emotionally, but also physically in our health and our well-being. And it sounds like you and Derek share some of that same very primal philosophy that all around most people don't share. I think that's probably the greatest statement you've ever shared in the time frame I've known and loved you, Kevin, is to think of ourselves not as a reservoir, not as a pool of stagnant water, but as a flowing river. And in that river, we add to tributaries and other streams as we flow down, and we benefit the lives of all the other people around us. So I think that's an important, powerful statement. Well, let me ask you.
So, and Brian, let me just, I don't want to interrupt you, but I will.
You always have.
So this idea of a reservoir versus a river, I wish that was my idea. It's not. I got it from Lee Brower, who was my coach at the Strategic Coach. And I told him, I said, Lee, you got to write a book about this. And he said, no, I'm too busy. I'm like, okay, well, can I write a book about it? And he said, no, it's my idea. I'm like, okay, well, then I will make sure to always give you credit because that made sense to me. Like I could see it. And I saw people, here's what I've observed. Like if you find yourself loving money or thinking money or creating these idols in your life, start giving some money away because you won't. And you'll be able to hold these things with an open hand. And that is about being part of the river.
I love that. Well, my friend, what's next for you? You've done so many things in your 50-some years on this planet. You've served in our military. You've played the greatest sport in the history of mankind. You've gone to a Ivy League school, a poison Ivy League school, Central Michigan University. You've made amazing friends and connections. You've raised an incredible family and have married one of the most amazing women I've ever met. You've started an amazing business that's changed lives and has grown from one person struggling in 1994 to 80 very successful people in a very, very amazing company in Korhorn Financial Group. You've traveled the world and you've given your time and your resources and your energy and your money to impoverished individuals in countries and in communities. What's next?
I don't know. I don't know how many years I have left. But I know as I get older and like this thing with Jackie Walorski dying, it's just a wake up call and a reminder of how short life is. And so I think what's next for me, Brian, is I'm going to figure out how long I'm going to do what I'm doing. Joshua and Caleb have both said they're interested in joining me in the business. If that's the case, I could see doing this for another 20 or 30 years. I want to know when my time is up as it relates to the business. And when I can't make a career, I have two amazing business partners, and I'm always asking them, guys, what do you want me to do? You tell me what you want me to do and I'll do that. And I've told them, I said, look, if Korhorn Financial Group outgrows me and we need someone else, someone different, someone better, let's get that person in here. And I'll just meet with clients. I love doing that. I love watching people succeed and helping them do so. So I don't know what's next. With my daughter Grace now 19, and my boys 21 and 22. We're almost empty nesters. I think I'm looking forward to September. We're going to spend a couple weeks in our motorhome in northern Michigan, which I've been all over the world and I've never seen a more beautiful place than northern Michigan. I just love it up there. So I think I'm going to do more. What I'm looking forward to is we waited 7 years to have kids, and I loved having my wife all to myself. And I feel like I'm getting my wife back, and so we're certainly looking forward to more travel. But what I'm most excited about right now is I have this really talented group of young financial planners who are humble, hungry, and wise. That's one of our core values, but they fit that to a T and they live it out. And so I am mentoring them and helping them become the next generation. Our industry, I don't know if folks know much about the financial planning industry. We've just done a horrible job of replicating ourselves because now this is going to sound unkind, so forgive me, but there are a lot of folks in our industry who see themselves as reservoirs. And so they're not replacing themselves. And I personally have given birth to over 40 certified financial planners. And not all of them are still here. They've gone to different places and either changed careers or stayed in the same career. And they're doing great things. But I am passionate about changing the world. I want to live in the most financially literate community in the world. I think that's possible. And our community is very underserved as it relates to financial services. So I am super pumped every day when I hop out of bed to come to work and help these guys become amazing certified financial planners who can help us in our mission to educate, advise, and serve with character and integrity.
I love that. One of the quick stories I want to share with the audience, and I'm going to keep our rugby time frame stories PG. One of the interesting, Kevin always had a little more money than the rest of us did, primarily because he had served in the military and the army, and I think he had a little stipend coming in every month. He always seemed like he was the rich one. He had a computer and a printer, and he had a water bed, and he lived across the hall from me in the rugby house in Central Michigan University. I didn't have a mattress, so I was on a board in a sleeping bag for, I don't know, maybe the first 3 or 4 months, and maybe I don't know if we found a mattress in a dumpster or maybe somebody donated one to me. I don't recall, but so many nights I would walk across the hall, and he and I would sit on his water bed, and we would have the most challenging debates. At the time, we didn't share a lot of similarities in our political or religious views. Now we do. Almost were clearly in sync. Back then we didn't. And we would have some of the most eye-opening conversations. And he would educate me on his thoughts, and I would educate him on his thoughts. And sometimes we would even begin arguing at times. But I always walked across the hall and went back to my board while he slept on his warm waterbed. And I always walked across the hall with a smile on my face, knowing that we had just educated each other, debated a bit, maybe even argued, but ended with a hug and an "I love you, brother." And I think that was one of the greatest lessons for me, having grown up as the youngest of 5 children, not having a sibling even close to my age. He was one of the first people that really taught me what true friendship really is. And for that, I thank you.
Well, you're welcome, Brian. I learned about true friendship. Really, I realized this looking back. I didn't know about true friendship until I was in the Army. And one of my best friends was Mitchell Douglas Turner. And he was a black guy from West Virginia. And growing up in Big Rapids, Michigan, there weren't any black people. There just weren't. And he was a roommate of mine, and he just the truest friend that anyone would ever have. So I had Mitchell, and I had Keith and Jimmy and some of my other friends, and I thought that's what it was going to be like when I went to college. I'm like, well, college is going to be amazing, because I had this incredible experience for 3 years with these guys that we did all this stuff together, and we're just so connected and bonded. And college wasn't really like that. Like, I had Brian and probably 2 other guys that I had that level of connection with. And so it was, in a way, for me, it was kind of, I was surprised, and I kind of felt let down a little bit, but it was certainly a great joy to when you found a friend who could be closer than a brother. It was a great treasure, and I have treasured our friendship for sure for all these years.
Amen and ditto. And I think that's a great lesson for so many of the listeners of the Bamboo Lab podcast is so often we meet people in our lives where the first impression is not favorable. It's not positive. Kevin and I really didn't think we were going to like each other. And sometimes many of us, if not most of us, tend to go separate ways right away with that first impression. And quite often it's that first impression is way off. And we give up so quickly and so soon, just like the gentleman who was in the strategic coach program who gave up after session number 4, where the big impact was session number 5. And sometimes when we continue to monitor and build those relationships, it's in the second, third, or sometimes the 15th meeting of that individual where you really build that bond. And I'm so glad that both of us didn't take our first impressions of each other too seriously, and we continued to grow together and in life. And Kevin, I can't imagine, and maybe I'll ask you this question. Could you imagine 30 years ago when you and I were traveling on a bus to go to play some obscure rugby team in some part of the Midwest, that we would be sitting here on the Bamboo Lab podcast interviewing your success and journey in life?
No, it's all just absolutely blown me away, because I've had a front row seat to your journey as you've had a front row seat to mine. And I'm still surprised. I still am. And it never gets old looking back at where we came from. And I think those were the days. That's what keeps us grounded and rooted, hopefully. And yeah, we've certainly been blessed and been able to, serve people and work at changing the world. So that's been really cool. But I do think there's no way I would have ever dreamed it would have been like this.
I think if there was an award at our last banquet for rugby, we would have both won or tied for first place for least likely to make it to 30.
Certainly. We certainly would have taken, we would have cleared out the trophy case in the least likely category.
I think so too.
But you know what? I go back to the greatest award I ever received in my life. Not that I've received a bunch at all, but when I was a senior in high school, I played football, and my brother was this all-state running back, and he's this great, incredible athlete, and he was older than me, and so everyone thought that I would be that too, and they were certainly disappointed. And so but I played. And at the banquet, they're announcing, "Hey, okay, so here we're gonna give out some awards, and this person was honorable mention, all conference linebacker." And so they went through the honorable mention, and then they went through second team, and then and they hadn't called me, and then they got to first team, and like, I could not believe I made first team all conference. And so they went through the first team all conference list, and they're like, "Okay, well, we're done with those awards." I'm thinking, what in the world? How did I not get an award? And yet I did take home an award that night. And I took home the most improved player award. And that is one of my most cherished possessions, because that's what I can do.
Right.
What can I do? I can keep improving. They will still time my 40-yard dash with a calendar. I mean, I'm not this incredible athlete like my brother was. And the comparison game, the only thing the comparison game will do is steal your joy. So I don't compare myself to other folks. But I've learned that I can be, there's no reason why I can't be the most improved player. And so that's what I've just, my whole life, I've strived to be that.
Well, you've always been a lifelong learner. There's no doubt, even from our early days of trying to cheat in our finance classes and trying to get homework done 3 minutes before class. And thankfully, we changed our ways. One last story before we say goodbye to Kevin, I want to share because it's one of the most meaningful stories that really wraps up and encapsulates Kevin's character. Years and years ago, it was when Kevin was still in his first 3 years of struggling in the industry. I went and visited he and Lori at their house near South Bend, Indiana. And we spent the night. I remember we grilled out or we went out to dinner. I vaguely remember. I think we might have had one beer or a glass of wine. And we talked and visited, the three of us, and recapped old college stories. And then I went to bed. And they went to bed. And maybe 15 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. And Kevin opens up. Hey, brother, can I come in? I said, yeah. He came in and sat down at the edge of my bed and presented me with a book. That book is still behind me in my bookshelf today. The book was Oh, the Places You Will Go by Dr. Seuss. And I wish I would have had it out here. I do. And, maybe this isn't the copy of it here. This is a different copy. But in it, he wrote a long passage in there about how proud he was of the places I have gone and the places I will continue to go. And he proceeded to read the entire book to me at the edge of my bed. And that book has become a treasure of mine. I do have it behind me, but I grabbed the wrong copy of it. And it just, at that moment, it solidified that the man I always thought he was and the man I always knew he would become, he was becoming that man. And today he is that man. And a friend of mine, and also a friend of Kevin's, Dave Dick out of Dallas, Texas, said to me one day that your goal, Brian, in life is that when you are on your deathbed, you get to shake hands with the man you could have been. And when you look into his eyes, you realize it is you. Kevin, I have no doubt that when you are on your deathbed and you shake hands with that man you could have been at your peak, you are going to be looking at your reflection in the mirror. I can't thank you enough, because during the toughest time of my life, when I thought at no moment up until I came to the CMU rugby pitch, that first practice, did I ever think I could be good at anything in life. And rugby taught me that I can be good at something. And it was because of the friendships of you and several others, but mostly you and John, who maintained the belief in me and gave me unconditional love during that time. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart, my friend and my brother.
Well, you're very kind, my friend. I love you. And I still am very, very proud of you.
Thank you. And amen and ditto back to you. All right, Bamboo Lab listeners, we're going to wrap it up here, but I want to, again, take this time to thank our amazing guest, my best friend and my brother, Kevin Korhorn. Thanks, buddy, for being an amazing guest on the Bamboo Lab podcast. Everyone out there, that was your cue to say something, Kevin, by the way.
I don't know if I'm supposed to say something or not.
You've never been a man to not have something to say.
I know. Well, yeah. So, do we want to record something or just call it a day?
That's where you were supposed to say something really nice about me, because I just said something very nice about you.
I couldn't think of anything.
Poor preparation. Well, I think the last 30 seconds of this podcast kind of describes the friendship and relationship he and I have had over the past 30 plus years. So with that, we'll sign off. Bamboo Lab listeners, thank you again for being such avid listeners and fans of the Bamboo Lab podcast. And I know it's because we bring such amazing guests like we have today with Kevin Korhorn. Please, I'm going to be including a link to the Korhorn Financial Group in the text of this podcast. Please check them out. They do some of the most amazing work I've ever seen, bar any industry, not just in the financial planning industry. These are some amazing people who truly, truly care about the world and their clients, and they live it every single day. So everyone out there, remember, you are not a reservoir of stagnant water. You are a flowing river that flows and goes in all directions, but always moving forward. And you have all these tributaries and streams that you can contribute to and change other people's lives throughout your journey. Every day, practice what Kevin and his team called the BIG. Begin in gratitude. It will change your life. In the meantime, everyone, get out there. Sculpt your lives. Give your best every day. Love and respect others. And live consciously. If you liked all the wonderful things Kevin said today, please smash that like button. Follow us on all the platforms, whatever you're listening to the Bamboo Lab podcast on now. Give us a review and share it with 3 others, because these are the messages and wisdom that changes the world. Thank you all. Until next time, love you all.